Tila hindi na nga nakapagpigil pa ang ilang senador matapos na tila ayaw ituloy ni Senate President Chis Escudero ang impeachment trial ni VP Sara Duterte. Ayon sa ilang mambabatas, ilang buwan na daw ang lumipas at tila gumagawa daw talaga ng paraan si Escudero upang hindi na matuloy ang impeachment ni VP Sara. Maging ang asawa nitong si Heart Evangelista ay nagtataka na din kung bakit ganoon na lang proteksyonan ni Chis si VP. Hindi tuloy napigilan ng ilan na isipin na tila may espesyal na relasyon sina Escudero at VP Sara Duterte. Narito panoorin ang video kung paano nabuking si Escudero at VP Sara.
This is the issue of whether the impeachment complaint transmitted by the House of Representatives to this Senate last February 5, 2025 can cross over to the Senate of the 20th Congress. Well, Mr. President and my dear colleagues, doubts have been publicly expressed by certain personalities whether the trial of the impeachment complaint against the Vice President can continue or cross over into the 20th Congress. I wish to share and put on the record some of my thoughts on this particular issue. Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 6 of the Philippine Constitution provides that, and I quote, "The Senate shall have the sole power to try and decide all cases of impeachment." Hence, this provision makes the Senate not just an impeachment court, but the impeachment court. An impeachment proceeding is sui generis, that is, unique or a class of its own. In Republic versus Sereno, it is described as a proceeding exercised by the legislative as representatives of the sovereign to vindicate the breach of the trust reposed by the people in the hands of the public officer by determining the public officer's fitness to stay in office. While the form, procedure, and substantive arguments in impeachments remind us of a court trial, it also has the characteristics of a political process. The decision-making process in impeachment is not governed by any fixed or binding standard of proof, allowing for broad discretion on the part of the members of the impeachment court when they make their final decision on the case. The decision makers or the members of the impeachment court can use any standard of proof they want, and this choice will not be subject to any review by any court, except the court of public opinion, which is not technically a court. This fact gives the impeachment proceedings its political character. Hence, to better understand these sui generis impeachment proceedings, we need to look for analogies using well-known principles and practices in other systems which are applicable to impeachment proceedings. As to the question of whether the impeachment trial conducted by the Senate in the 19th Congress or the impeachment complaint entertained by the Senate in the 19th Congress can cross over and continue into the 20th Congress, there is no provision in the 1987 Constitution or in the Senate Rules of Procedure on impeachment trials that expressly prohibits this. On the contrary, the Senate Rules on Impeachment support the position that the impeachment trial shall continue until final judgment, even if it is necessary to continue into the next Congress. Let me read the rules. Rule number 3. Upon presentation of the articles to the Senate shall specify the date and time for the consideration of such articles. Unless the Senate provides otherwise, it shall continue in session from day to day, except Saturdays, Sundays, and non-working holidays, until final judgment shall be rendered and so much longer as may in its judgment be necessary. There is a contrary opinion that the rules of the Senate mandate that all pending matters and proceedings shall terminate upon the expiration of one Congress should take precedence over the cited rules on impeachment, which state that the trial shall continue until final judgment. The justification for the precedence given to the rules of the Senate is that the latter were passed by virtue of the power granted by the Constitution to the Senate to promulgate its rules. That is found in Article 6, Section 16, Paragraph 3, which provides each House may determine the rules of its proceedings. However, the Senate rules on impeachment were also passed by virtue of the power granted by the same Constitution to the Senate to promulgate its rules on impeachment. So let us all look at Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 8, which provides the Congress shall promulgate its rules on impeachment to effectively carry out the purpose of this section. In fact, there should be no conflict between the two rules because the rules of the Senate apply to legislative proceedings of the Senate, while the rules on impeachment apply to cases of impeachment. On this issue, the Supreme Court in the case of Pimentel Jr. versus Joint Committee of Congress ruled that the legislative functions of the 12th Congress may have come to a close upon the final adjournment of its regular sessions on June 11, 2004. But this does not affect its non-legislative functions. Conducting impeachment trials is most definitely not a legislative function. In fact, the section in the Constitution which speaks of impeachment is found in Article 11 under the title Accountability of Public Officers, and not under Article 6, which is titled the Legislative Department. The conduct of impeachment trials, therefore, should not be affected by the final adjournment of the legislative session. Furthermore, we can use the analogy of the court system. Under the 1987 Constitution, the Senate is the impeachment court. The Senate in impeachment cases is more like a judicial body than a legislative one. Just like a court, the workload, caseload, or docket of the Senate as the impeachment court will not and should not be affected by a change in membership. We can see this principle in action in all our courts and electoral tribunals, where their case dockets do not change and are not reduced or reset to zero whenever there are changes in the court's membership. Likewise, it is well settled that jurisdiction once acquired is not lost but continues until the case is terminated, and hopefully terminated to its logical end. Hence, it is my humble opinion that the trial of the current impeachment case, now pending before the Senate of the 19th Congress, can cross over or continue from the 19th Congress to the 20th Congress. The impeachment docket of the Senate Impeachment Court continues and remains to be the same. So thank you very much, Mr. President, my dear colleagues, for your time and attention.
Thank you, Senator Coco Pimentel, our distinguished minority floor leader.
Although that was only a manifestation, I am willing to entertain questions. Should there be any questions, Mr. President?
Just two quick questions with the permission of this body.
With the permission of the Honorable Pimentel, the gentleman may proceed.
Mr. President, kanina po narinig ko yung historical antecedents ng binanggit Your Honor, Senator Pimentel, would the good gentleman agree that the reason why the position of constitutionalists, textualists for that matter, on this issue is that the Constitution is silent as to the word carry over, crossover, continue. Meron po ba nakalagay sa Constitution, sa Saligang Batas ng Pilipinas, 1935, 1973, 1987 na carry over?
Mr. President, I will respond directly to the question. Wala pong nakasulat doon that it shall carry over, pero binanggit ko sa aking manifestation, wala talaga rin nakasulat doon that it cannot cross over. So, in effect, let us say textually, both positions are not even mentioned or entertained in the Constitution.
Mr. President, sangayon po kaya ang ating ginagalang na minority leader na kaya dahil walang carry-over notion ay dahil malaki po ang pagkakaiba. There's a big difference between the 1987 Constitution and the 1935 Constitution, which was patterned after the United States Constitution. And I would like to have this placed on the records, Mr. President. Sa US Constitution, 100 po ang senador at nag-i-eleksyon po every 2 years ng 33 senators. Ang naiiwan pong senador sa Estados Unidos pag nag-i-eleksyon ay 67. Because 67 plus 33 is 100. 67 is sufficient to comply with the provision of the US Constitution to convict in an impeachment case. Dahil 2/3 po yon ay 66. May sobra pang isa. Sa atin pong saligang batas noong 1935, kung inyo pong susuriin, ang atin pong senador na bumubuo rin ng impeachment court ay 24. Subalit, Mr. President, in the 1935 Constitution, ang eleksyon po natin ay 8, 8, 8. Tuwing mag-i-eleksyon ng senador, ang i-elect na senador kasama sa mga kongresista ay 8 senador lamang. Ang may iwan po ay 16. And 16 is 2/3. Enough to have a quorum as well as to convict or to acquit. In our present constitutional scheme, 1987 Constitution, we also have 24 senators, but we conduct elections every 3 years for 12 senators. Meaning to say, Mr. President, yung may iwang kalahati na 12 is not sufficient to constitute a quorum, dahil 12, dapat 13, much more convict. Because to convict, you need 16 senators, Mr. President. Is it now the proposition of the good minority leader that the constitutional spirit as enshrined in the 1935 Constitution, the same as the spirit prevailing, although it is not as admitted by the good minority leader, textually enshrined, the same as the 1935? Ibig sabihin po ba yung 12 ay may quorum? Yung 12 ay pwedeng maging 2/3 to allow your notion that we can carry over at yung sikat nga yung salita, maitawid. Tama po ba yun, Mr. President?
Ako, Mr. President, yung 2/3 kasi is actually that was probably just the decision of the framers of the Constitution. They could have made it 1+1. They could have made it 3/4. So it's maybe by accident that 2/3 is equal to 8 plus 8 is 16 is 2/3, so 24. But I do not think that that was really the point, Mr. President. But at any rate, we have to live with the 1987 Constitution. So we look at the 1987 Constitution. And looking at the 1987 Constitution, the Senate is the impeachment court, not because it is the Senate created under Article 6, because it was recognized to be the court under Article 11. The framers could have chosen another body to be the court. That is theoretically possible. But it chose the Senate, not as a legislative body, but as a part of Congress, but not as a legislative body. So, yun po yung aking pagkaintindi. We have to live with the 1987 Constitution. We copied generally the idea siguro sa United States, but let's not be so beholden to their practices and rulings kasi iba na rin po, iba talaga ang sitwasyon natin. And I think textually speaking, my position is supported that although we keep on saying Senate, but this is not Senate as the other half of Congress, but this is the Senate chosen under Article 11 to be the impeachment court. So iba po ito. And then may paragraph 8 doon, sinabi, Congress shall also issue the rules to give life to the accountability of public officers. So, and we have done that. So, kaya ang aking stand actually is the Senate as an institution is the impeachment court. So the member judges can change. But just like as a division of the Supreme Court, division of the Sandigan Bayan and the CA, if they change their members, yung docket nila or caseload nila, tuloy pa rin. They have to decide the cases and bring the cases to their logical conclusion. So that is my simplified position, Mr. President.
So one last question, Mr. President, if the good gentleman would accede. Ang ibig sabihin po nito, Mr. President, is that the Senate now, under the 19th Congress, is empowered, is authorized to confer a jurisdiction to another Senate, which would be forthcoming, the Senate of the 20th Congress. So, allowed po ba tayo under the Constitution to transfer pending business, or should it follow likewise, using your logic, the traditional norm of having it refiled and reset starting from zero? Similar to the bills.
Yes, yun na nga.
So, ang ibig ko sabihin, Mr. President, what would prevent the 19th Congress from passing on the impeachment case, not just to the 20th Congress, but to the 21st Congress? And I implore the good minority leader that all the provisions mentioned a while ago, which are correct, should likewise be read together with the constitutional provision that there should be only one impeachment case filed per year against the same respondent, Mr. President.
Alam nyo ba, Mr. President, na yung rule na yung legislative workload natin ay magre-reset pag may bagong kongreso? Alam nyo ba na wala sa Constitution yun? Nasa rules natin yun. Ang rules natin, promulgated natin because of the power given to us by the Constitution. But the Constitution does not specify that. Actually, we could have written na yung pumasa na ng third reading, itrato natin na third reading na rin. We could do that, but we did not do it. So policy lang po yun na reset natin as far as legislative workload is concerned. Pagdating naman sa impeachment judicial workload of the Senate as an impeachment court, I propose or I give the interpretation that the caseload remains. Ang nagbago lang are the member judges, just like I think we can easily envision sa Supreme Court, nagbabago, divisions ng CA, divisions ng Sandigan Bayan, but the caseload remains. So I think we can mentally separate the two kasi Article 6 yung legislative workload, Article 11 yung impeachment workload. So that would be my response, Mr. President.
But Mr. President, would not that prevent the other part of the two-step process? Two-step process because filed by the lower house, prosecutors, received by the Senate, the trial jurors, the trial judges. Would not that prevent the other part of the two-leg process from initiating another complaint because there is now a case pending which you say should be continuing?
If the majority leader will allow me not to respond, but
yes, because
his question is very loaded and provides the hint of what can happen in the future.
Mr. President, I've taken too much time of this body. I would relish interpolating the good minority leader even for 5 hours on this topic alone. But again, Mr. President, siguro mahabang-mahaba na po ito. I stick again to my previous manifestation that if we will not be able to conclude whether acquittal or conviction, the present impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte before the lapse of the 19th Congress, the same is functionally dismissed or deemed de facto dismissed, Mr. President. Yun lamang po, Mr. President, at ako po ay nagpapasalamat sa ating minority leader.
Thank you, Senator Tolentino. Briefly, Senator Pimentel.
Mr. President, while I still have the floor, can I request for some information from the Senate President, especially regarding the impeachment calendar that
The
is
gentleman may
issued,
proceed.
because you issued the first impeachment calendar was issued by the Senate President when we were already on break. I mean, Mr. President, tama po yun, di ba?
That is correct.
So, Mr. President, may we know when His Honor issued the first legislative calendar, impeachment calendar, which fixed June 2 as the time for receiving the House prosecutors, may we know the basis of the authority of the Senate President when he issued the first impeachment calendar, Mr. President?
Article 1 of the impeachment rules, which says that the Senate President can set the date for the presentation of the articles of impeachment. Mention was made specifically of the Senate President. And also we were on recess. So the Senate President at that time, Your Honor, issued a suggested calendar of activities. I was very clear when I stated that. Subject to plenary approval when we resume, because you were already on recess at that time. The second notice sent by this representation was made also while we were on recess. And I also stated that it was subject to plenary approval and or reversal, as the case may be, given the load that we need to take up after the LEDAC meeting.
So, yes, Mr. President, I noticed that no one from the majority was complaining about the original or initial impeachment calendar issued by the Senate President. So we were all looking forward to the date where there should be some action on the impeachment, which is
Yes.
June 2.
Supposedly,
So,
yes.
Yes, supposed to be. Kaninang 4 o'clock yung the prosecutors from the House of Representatives should have appeared before us to read the articles of impeachment. But then this was changed. So from June 2, changed by the Senate President also, now
June 11.
it's June 11 at 4 p.m. So if the authority used to issue the original calendar was based on the fact that we were on break, now that we are not on break, could not have the Senate President waited for 3 p.m. and then we discussed moving the June 2 4 p.m. to June 11 4 p.m.
Because, Your Honor, notice had to be given to the House with respect to the proposed change in schedule. And we could not decide on moving it after the House members are already here
Yeah.
in the Senate. That was the reason behind it.
That was His Honor's judgment call, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. Yes, Your Honor.
Just on another matter, Mr. President, yung appearance ba ng House prosecutors ay nasa Senate impeachment rules or you just took this from American practice, Mr. President?
It is not in the rules. That was lifted from American practice because what was done before was that the majority leader,
Yes.
the Senate majority leader, was the one that read the articles of impeachment that was referred to the Committee on Rules that triggered the convening of the impeachment court. When we researched on it, we thought it was more proper, given that we should have no part in it, in the impeachment trial, in the prosecution of the impeachment case, that the prosecutors should themselves read the articles of impeachment, as is the practice in the United States, where we lifted most of our impeachment rules.
So it's an innovation. But although, had we done it, hindi naman, I don't think it would be fatal or make the proceedings infirm. So it's just not, to use the term of the majority leader, textually required under the existing Senate impeachment rules. Hindi pa ba?
No, what was required by our rules, if at all, was the referral of the impeachment complaint in plenary. Because mere filing with the Secretary General does not often by itself operate as the receipt by the Senate in plenary, given that, as with any communication, it has to be referred in plenary, officially by the Senate as a body.
Mr. President,
Sige, Mr. President.
Mr. President, with the permission,
Senator Tolentino is recognized. What is your pleasure, sir?
would the loaded question of the good minority leader, if decoded, would mean that should the presentment be made before the Senate sitting as a plenary, or should the presentment be made before the Senate constituted as an impeachment court? Baka yun po yung tanong nyo.
But it was the Senate President to research on American practice. How do they do? How do they do it in the United
In
States?
plenary, Your Honors, not as an impeachment court, because again, mere receipt by the SecGen does not operationalize or start the process of impeachment. Any communication, and that is a communication from the House, must be referred by plenary to the appropriate committee for proper action. That in turn will now trigger, if at all, the convening of the impeachment court, where the regular processes would now be followed, such as the issuance of summons, etc., etc.
May we know the rule, Mr. President, that it
I'm
should
sorry?
be? May we know what the specific rule is? That in the rules, or is that by practice or costumbre? Tingnan niyo ano rule.
Under Rule 3, Paragraph 2, upon presentation of the articles to the Senate shall specify the date and time for the consideration of the articles.
Yes, but
So the articles need to be presented to the Senate.
yes, but so your Honor is reading our Senate impeachment rules.
Yes.
Correct. So when we use the Senate in the Senate impeachment rules, we're talking about, we could be talking about the Senate as the impeachment court. Because
We
it's the
have-
Senate.
And by virtue of the procedure in Articles 1 to 3, we have not yet convened the court, Your Honor. For example, succeeding rules in our impeachment rules, 4 onwards, would pertain to the Senate already as an impeachment court, because that is already the trial proper, beginning with the issuance of summons.
Mr. President, the second sentence already contradicts His Honor, because it says, second sentence of that second paragraph of Rule 3, unless the Senate provides otherwise, it shall continue in session from day to day. session na yan as court. Kasi until final judgment eh. Yun na yun eh. So, when we use Senate in the Senate impeachment rules, we refer to the Senate as the court.
Mr. President,
According to the Secretariat, Your Honor, the dividing line is when we take our oath as senator judges and convene as such. Because we will be wearing two hats, Your Honor. As senators, performing our legislative and legislative function, and as members of the impeachment court, performing our sui generis function. And these are two distinct, if at all, hats and functions that we would be performing. That's why we have to adjourn session and convene as an impeachment court, and vice versa if we want to revert back as a plenary.
Well, Mr. President, ano na lang for so as to
Mr. President,
our staff can revisit. Ito yung sentence natin, ano? Second paragraph of Rule 3 of the Senate impeachment rules. Upon presentation of the articles to the Senate shall specify the date and time for the consideration of such articles. Unless the Senate provides otherwise, it shall continue in session from day to day until final judgment shall be rendered, and so much longer as may in its judgment be necessary. So, are we using the word Senate in one paragraph in two concepts? One as Senate legislative body and the other as the court?
I believe so, Mr.
Correct.
President,
Ganun na yan.
Your Honor. But again,
So,
since these manifestations, also the manifestation made by our distinguished majority floor leader himself earlier, after these manifestations are made, these matters and these statements will be referred to the Committee on Rules for them to look into it. We have time, Mr. President, Your Honor, to resolve this matter in due course in the next couple of days.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I can direct this question to the good minority leader. The Senate, even if not acting as an impeachment court, pwede po bang tumanggap ng mga non-members of this chamber to speak or make a presentation, a presentment? Di po ba naaalala natin ng mga nakaraang panahon, pumupunta rito yung President of Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken. Distinguished guests of this chamber are allowed to speak, not just honored. Ganun po ba yung sinasabi nyo? Na baka are the members of the House, though constituted as panel of prosecutors, can they enter the Senate, this chamber, constituted as a plenary or as an impeachment court or both? Pag pinapayagan ng Senado. Baka ganun po siguro ang gustong
Okay.
malaman ng ating minority
Oo.
leader.
Just for the information of the majority leader, yung appearance of the House prosecutors before the Senate kanina sanang 4 o'clock, June 2, appeared in the impeachment calendar prepared by the Senate President. Hindi ako may idea nun. At saka, when we read our Senate impeachment rules, wala din dun yun.
So they will
That's
be
why-
appearing
that's why-
before an impeachment court.
That's,
Yun po.
that's why this is the request for information. Now, what did the Senate President have in mind when he scheduled this for June 2? And I think it's clearly, since 4 p.m. siya, it's clearly an appearance before Senate,
Yes.
the plenary session of the Senate.
Again, the
Yes.
basis is US practice. That is how they do it in the United States, where we lifted portions of our own impeachment rules. That's where it came from. Practice and precedents in the United States.
And per our legislative rules, we can waive the rules so that we
can
allow
suspend the
non-members
rules to allow
speak. Di ba dito, recently nagsalita rin si former UN Secretary
Korean,
General.
South Korean.
Huh?
The South Korean.
Yes, that's UN Secretary General. So
That can be
so we
allowed.
can do it. Yes, yes.
Again, that can be allowed. Again, plenary action is necessary and the plenary will decide on this matter.
So just a few more requests for information, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, you His Honor around 4 days ago sent notice that the June 2 4 p.m. appearance of the panel of prosecutors will be moved to June 11 4 p.m.
Yes.
So, okay. Now what is now the calendar that His Honor has in mind? Kasi dati meron kang June 2 4 p.m. appearance, then June 3 morning we convene the Senate as an impeachment court. So where is that? Where is this convening now? Where is it now when you move the
Sabay-
appearance to June 11?
Sabay na po because by that time, by June 11, wala na rin po tayong hinahabol na kailangan i-second or i-approve kung meron man ratification na lamang ng mga bicameral conference committee reports. And we will be doing both at the same time. If at all, the reading of the articles of impeachment, the referral to the Committee on Rules, the convening of the impeachment court, if at all again, the oath of the senator judges, if at all again, all that we can do as an impeachment court would be to issue summons
Yes. Oh,
requiring the respondent to answer within 10 days.
but were we sent notices na ganun ang mangyayari?
I'm sorry?
Were the senators sent notices or informed that after the appearance of the House panel of prosecutors, there's a possibility that we will convene as a court?
That was-
Para ready kami.
Wala pa.
Wala pa nga. Kaya
Wala
malapit
pa.
na po yung June 11.
Wala pa naman talaga eh. Kasi nung pinadala yung notice na yun, it was addressed, if you notice, it was addressed to the House that they will be presenting the articles of impeachment on that date. The notice insofar as the impeachment court itself is concerned, these discussions would be very helpful, Your Honor, because this will be part of how the Senate as a body will be deciding on what to do after the articles of impeachment shall have been read and presented before the body.
Yes, but Mr. President, nung in-issue kasi ninyo yung impeachment calendar last February, at least you were that detailed na sinabi nyo na po yung convening of the impeachment court. Ngayon sana po, nung i-defer si June to appearance, sana pati po yung convening as an impeachment court, nasabi na rin when that is para may idea.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. Since that is our last day, this representation has no intentions of actually convening the court, if at all, on another date other than the 11th, unless the Senate as an impeachment court provides otherwise. So we will be convening on that date, barring any unforeseen circumstances, barring any procedural motions that will be made, and will be settled by the plenary at that time.
Well, Mr. President, it was just, ito lang for the consumption of our staff and secretariat. It was just pointed out to me that the rule that we mentioned earlier, second paragraph of Rule 3, yung first paragraph pala, it provides that nakapag-oath na. Nakapag-oath na ang member. So if that is now the dividing line, we have crossed the line. So Senate na po ito as a court. So tingnan na lang po muli, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Your Honor, the first paragraph refers to consideration of the articles of impeachment. The second paragraph, we were not part of the Senate that wrote these rules. The first paragraph, it mentions the word consideration. The second paragraph mentions the word presentation. In terms of time, presentation should come first before consideration, although as it appears in our rules, consideration was mentioned first in the first paragraph and before presentation in the second paragraph. But in terms of order, Your Honor, presentation should logically come first before consideration of the articles of impeachment.
And then
Where
in
there
the-
is nothing to consider unless presented.
And then in the next breath, it talks about the trial na.
Yes, again, we had no part in writing these rules.
Okay,
I
so
would not
yes,
want to critique it as well because during those times, perhaps this was apt and sufficient.
So Mr. President, maybe now kasi ang media nagtatatanong sa akin na pinapa-speculate pa ako na just for the record, what is now the reason that His Honor has taken the initiative to reset the June 2 2025, 4 p.m. appearance of the panel of prosecutors before the Senate plenary to June 11, 4 p.m. What's
It was
what's
in
the
the
main
letter
reason, Mr.
addressed to
President?
Speaker Martin, copy furnished to all of the senators as well as Vice President Sara Duterte. Given the meeting we had at LEDAC with His Honor's presence, several bills needed to be approved and taken up before we finally finish and wind up the 19th Congress. Meaning to say some bills need to be approved on second reading within the week today, so that we can do third reading next week. Some bills have to be approved on third reading today and within this week, so that bicameral conference committees can finalize and iron out the disagreeing provisions between the Senate and House versions, so that we would still have time next week to either ratify these bicameral conference committee reports or still do third reading in compliance with the constitutional requirement of 3 readings on 3 separate days, at least 3 days after it's approved on second reading.
So, sige, last question na lang, Mr.
Apa.
President. Per our rules or practice, how would we now react to the receipt of the articles of impeachment last February 5, 2025? How should the Senate, as a legislative body in plenary session, react to that receipt?
In line with Article 1 of our impeachment rules, which makes mention of the authority and responsibility of the President of the Senate. That is why I set the schedule for the articles to be read in plenary, which in turn would trigger, if at all, the creation of the impeachment court. Which, if at all, would now proceed with the issuance of summons for the respondent or defendant.
Would not the impeachment complaint received last February 5, 2025 be included in the reference of business? Ano ito? Ito ba ay person?
It will be included in the reference of business, yes. Supposedly today, kung natuloy tayo today, but on June 11, so that it can be included in the agenda for that particular day.
That's my point, Mr. President. Kung i-reference of business, why are we not doing it today? Anong damage kung gawin natin today?
Pwede rin naman. Hindi pa tayo
Yes.
nagbabasa ng reference
Yes,
of
yun na nga.
business. Pero wala, no?
Are we doing it today? Kasi February 5 pa yun. That's why I'm mentioning the date that it was received, February 5. So can we include it in the reference of business today? Kasi parang mas normal eh. Mas normal yun eh. Kung
We
na-receive
will look
yung-
into it, Your Honor. I tend to agree with this Honor's position.
It's
We
just
will
no-
take it up with the Secretary.
It's just normal, Mr.
Yes,
President.
yes.
Received last February 5, we're reporting out today. Okay?
Off the record, they explained the reason behind it. But I tend to agree with Your Honor, and I'll ask the Secretary to consider it. Because in the past, as they said, it was the majority leader who read it and not the prosecutors, supposedly. So it was included in the reference of business, referred to the Rules Committee, and the majority leader was the one who reported it out, quote unquote. But now, given that it's the prosecutors that will read the articles of impeachment, again, following US practice and precedent, the Secretary thought it best that it'll be included in the agenda on that day because there is no referral to the Committee on Rules. But again, we will look into it and we will take the suggestion of the gentleman in light of the points he raised in connection with that.
Because I believe there should have been also a letter accompanying the impeachment complaint. There must have been a cover letter from the House. So, parang ganon. So we can...
Only by the section, not by the Speaker nor any member of the House.
Yes. But is a letter from the SecGen also a communication from the House?
It was a covering letter only.
Yeah. So, So I think this is just an opinion.
I tend to agree, Your Honor.
It's more natural that we report out if something happened last February 5, late evening of late in the session on February 5. Something happened, we report it out so it's more natural if we report it out immediately, Mr. President. So
I tend to agree,
that's
Your
all,
Honor.
that's
Again.
my point, Mr. President.
I will take it up with the committee secretary.
So with that, Mr. President, I thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I just wanted to request some information. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Honor. What is the pleasure of the Honorable Ontiveros?
Salamat, Tabi, Mr. President. Gusto kong magdagdag ng point dun sa binanggit pareho ng majority leader, ng minority leader at pati ng Senate President. Yung references sa US practice and precedent. Kaugnay nung isa sa mga issue na pinag-usapan dito sa floor. Kung pwede ba o dapat bang mag-carry over yung impeachment process mula sa 19th Congress hanggang sa 20th Congress. And I would just like to put this on the record, Mr. President. Galing po ito sa isang piyesa authored ni UP Professor Paulo Tamase, nag-appear po sa June 2025 issue ng Philippine Law Journal. Sabi po dito, Emerging Issues in Impeachment, page 19 dun sa journal, allowing impeachment to cross over Congresses is consistent with American practice. Following the practice of the United Kingdom, Thomas Jefferson's Manual of Parliamentary Practice states that an, quote, impeachment is not discontinued by the dissolution of Parliament, but may be resumed by the new Parliament, close quote. The US Congress na binanggit ng majority leader, ng minority leader at ng Senate President, the US Congress has observed this for over 200 years. From the 1803 impeachment of Judge John Pickering to that of Judge Porteus in 2009. In Congress, impeachment proceedings are not discontinued by a recess. The following impeachment proceedings extended from one Congress to the next. 5 pong halimbawa, Mr. President, sa article na ito. Babangkitin ko lang yung pang-apat kasi yun pamilyar sa ating mga Pilipino. 4. The impeachment of President Clinton was presented to the Senate after the Senate had adjourned sine die. After, Mr. President, the Senate had adjourned sine die for the 105th Congress, and the Senate conducted the trial in the 106th Congress, Mr. President. So, for the record lamang po, dahil very, very pertinent sa binanggit ng majority leader, ng minority leader, at pati ng Senate President na following US practice and precedent. And with one very recent concrete example po dun sa impeachment ni US President Clinton. So I hope that we can consider this in our own decision-making, Mr. President, even after the rescheduled presentation by the House prosecutors to the Senate as an impeachment court on 11th June. Salamat, Tabi, Mr. President.
Duly noted and entered into the records. Majority Floor Leader.
Just to reiterate again, yung nabanggit ko po kanina nga, magkaiba yung sa Philippine Senate at US Senate kasi ang naiiwan sa US Senate tuwing mag-ieleksyon ay 67 senators, enough to constitute a quorum out of 100 senators and enough to convict or acquit. Sa atin po, 12 lang, not enough to have a quorum of 13, more so a number of 16 to convict or acquit. But be that as it may, Mr. President, we have all the discussions done, and I think this would really be part not just of the discussions that whatever case would be elevated to the Supreme Court would eventually be decided in the near term. Mr. President, I seek a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Just 2 weeks before the sine die adjournment of the 19th Congress. But this isn't just the final stretch of the session. It is also the first time we reconvene after the 2025 midterm elections, an event that has reshaped our political landscape and renewed the people's mandate for governance. Let me begin with a heartfelt message to all of you. To those who prevailed, congratulations. The people have placed their trust in you once again. Carry that trust with honor, humility, and grace. Use your renewed mandate to fight even harder for their needs, for their hopes, and for the future where no Filipino is left behind. And to the rest of my colleagues, saludo po ako sa inyo. Your service in this chamber will not be forgotten. Hindi man kayo nabigyan muli ng panibagong termino, tandaan ninyo, you were a part of something bigger than any one election. You helped us pass laws, you shaped debate, you served your districts with passion and integrity. You gave your all, and the Filipino people saw it. Your legacy is now woven into the fabric of this Congress. At kahit wala na kayo dito sa susunod na panahon, mananatili kayong bahagi ng tagumpay ng 19th Congress. Let me say this with pride, this House of the People delivered. Of the 28 LEDAC priority bills, we acted on 27. For the broader common legislative agenda, we approved 61 out of 64. But this isn't about numbers. It's about lives. We cracked down on smugglers and hoarders who make basic goods unaffordable for ordinary families. We gave stronger support to our rice farmers with 30 billion a year for seeds, mechanization, and productivity. We passed laws to fix job skills mismatches, invest in young workers, and prepare our people for the demands of a modern economy. We passed the Magna Carta for Filipino seafarers to give dignity and protection to those who power our global maritime reputation. These are real solutions to real problems, not just speeches, not just slogans. Tunay na malasakit, tunay ng pagbabago. And we did this not through political dominance, but through political unity. We bridged divides, we reached across parties, we listened to one another, debated with one another, but in the end, we voted for the Filipino. We showed that in the face of challenge, this House stood strong. We chose country over color, service over self. This is the power of democracy. This is the spirit of Bagong Pilipinas. Pero mga kasama, hindi pa tapos ang laban. We still have important work to do in these final 2 weeks. Let us pass the Open Access in Data Transmission Act to make fast, reliable internet accessible to every barangay. Let us finalize the E-Governance Act so that public services become faster, smarter, and less prone to red tape. Let us pass the first ever Philippine legislation on artificial intelligence to embrace innovation while protecting ethics, privacy, and human dignity. Let us support the 20 peso rice program of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., not just as a national policy, but as a promise to every Filipino family struggling to make ends meet. As we prepare to close this chapter, we must also defend the democratic institutions we represent. Fake news, online manipulation, disinformation, these are not just annoyances, they are threats to the truth and to trust. Let the House of the People be a bastion of fact, reason, and fairness. Let us defend the public's right to know the truth and protect the sanctity of our elections and institutions. Mga kasama, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Whether you are returning in the 20th Congress or closing your final term in public office, you are part of the legacy of one of the most productive and united Congresses in Philippine history. Let us use every remaining hour, every session day, every ounce of our energy to complete what we started. Let history remember us not just as lawmakers, but as leaders who chose unity over division, service over ambition, and people over politics. Tuloy ang trabaho, tuloy ang malasakit. Tuloy ang bagong Pilipinas. Mabuhay ang mga laking kapulungan ng Kongreso. Mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino. Maraming salamat po.
Today I stand before you not just as representative of Tingog Party List, but as the voice of a region now crippled, a community now suffering, and a people now calling for action. The closure of the San Juanico Bridge is not merely a regional inconvenience. It is a national failure that exposes the fragility of our infrastructure system and the negligence of those entrusted with safeguarding them. And it could have been prevented. On May 8, the Department of Public Works and Highways issued a public advisory effectively banning trucks and buses exceeding 3 metric tons from crossing the San Juanico Bridge. This decision was based on a structural integrity assessment that, while necessary, came far too late. Let's call this for what it is, a breakdown in preparedness. The San Juanico Bridge is more than just a structure of concrete and steel. It is more than an engineering marvel, nor it is just a scenic route tourists love to photograph. It is the beating heart of Eastern Visayas. It connects Leyte and Samar, two island economies, entirely reliant on this singular link. It is a vital artery of the Pan-Philippine Highway, our country's backbone for land-based movement of goods, services, and people. Every day, thousands of vehicles, including around 1,400 heavy trucks, traverse this bridge, each one carrying life, livelihood, and hope. And when you cut that link, without warning or preparation, everything else breaks down. Overnight, we saw the movement of goods grind to a halt and supply chains disrupted. Truckloads of farm produce from Samar and Mindanao could no longer make it to Tacloban or to the major markets in Luzon. Construction materials were stranded. Hardware supplies delayed. Even medicines couldn't be delivered on time. This is more than a mere logistical nightmare. It is a crisis of foresight, of preparedness, of leadership. And who feels it the most? It's the ordinary Filipino who bears the brunt of this failure. It's the small farmer whose perishable crops are rotting on the side of the road because they don't have access to adequate storage facilities. It's the sari-sari store owner who suddenly has to raise prices because transport costs doubled. It's the patient waiting for medicine struck on a truck. It's the mother worried sick that milk and diapers might not arrive on time. What is worse, Mr. Speaker, is that this could have been avoided. The San Juanico Bridge did not age overnight. Its structural problems were not a surprise. Yet DPWH waited for the results of a consultant study before taking any real action and by then it was too late. There were no contingency measures in place, no alternative routes ready, no emergency logistics plan. This is negligence, plain and simple, and it is unacceptable. We all know that the San Juanico Bridge is over 50 years old. It's no surprise to anyone. We all know that time, weather, and overloading have taken their toll on the structure. But what did DPWH do to prepare? They waited. They didn't plan. They didn't coordinate ahead with local governments or the private sector. They failed to engage the region before dropping a decision that would paralyze its economy. When the advisory came, it came like a lightning bolt. Businesses were caught off guard. Local government units were left scrambling. National agencies had no ready roadmap for rerouting, for regulating traffic, for handling freight, or even for keeping stranded travelers safe. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. The people of Eastern Visayas are not angry because the bridge is being repaired. We welcome this rehabilitation. What we cannot accept is the insensitivity, the utter disregard of those entrusted to plan this repair. Last May 17, we sat down with the representatives of the concerned agencies. While I commend those who showed up, listened, and committed to act, the truth was also painfully clear. Most agencies were reacting, not leading. Maritime alternatives were still being studied. Port readiness is still lagging. No clear timeline in place. We have yet to place a system for price control, and stranded truck drivers were for hours, times days, with no compensation for lost time. This cannot stand. This must not stand. We need all hands on deck, and we need them now. Government agencies must work together, not in silos, not in press releases, but in action. They need to set up interim transport solutions, fast-track permits, manage port congestion, prevent overpricing, provide basic support to stranded motorists, and ensure that our medical and food supply chains don't collapse. And DPWH must answer, not just with updates, but with accountability. Where were the warning systems? Where were the contingency protocols? Why was there no engagement with regional stakeholders months ago? It is infuriating that we are made to feel like we are an afterthought when in fact Eastern Visayas have long been a reliable partner in national development. Our local government units did not wait. The provincial government of Samar, under the leadership of Governor Sharian Tan, quickly convened stakeholders. The Executive Committee of the Regional Development Council, under the chairmanship of Mayor Lucy Torres, immediately called for an emergency meeting. They offered ideas, they took initiative, they moved because waiting was not an option. And Mr. Speaker, our business community rose to the challenge. The Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Tacloban Leyte, the Tacloban Filipino-Chinese Chamber of Commerce, the Constructors Association, the Drugstores Association, and others, who did not only raise the alarm, but also roll their sleeves to help craft solutions. Mr. Speaker, this is why Tingog Party List filed a bill declaring the Maharlika Highway as our national food highway. Because roads like this one are not just infrastructure, they are lifelines. They are critical to food security, health delivery, and economic movement. They are the arteries that pump life to our nation, connecting our regions, and sustaining our communities. And today, with a few days left in our calendar, I am filing a resolution calling for a congressional inquiry into the current state of the San Juanico Bridge and the actions or inaction of DPWH and other agencies. But I know resolutions alone won't solve this. What is needed now is a decisive, coordinated action. Concrete, immediate interventions on the ground, not delays, not deferrals, to stop this crisis from spiraling into a broader economic and social catastrophe. We're facing escalating freight costs, longer transit times, looming economic slowdown, reduced investor confidence, and potential ripple effects on food security and health logistics nationwide. This demands an urgent, no excuses, economic mitigation plan, one that recognizes the severity of the situation and responds with the urgency reserved for natural disasters. Structural repairs must be matched by aggressive, well-sourced economic support. Policies must be aligned, emergency funds disbursed, and those responsible for delivery held to account immediately and without compromise. Because this is not just an Eastern Visayas crisis. This is a national systems failure in plain sight. And if we do not fix it now, we are guaranteeing that it will happen again somewhere else with even higher stakes. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, we must act now, immediately, no delays, no deferrals. Mobilize every agency, deploy the necessary resources, cut through bureaucratic inertia, and get boots on the ground without delay. This is a national emergency that demands utmost urgency, complete accountability, and steadfast commitment from every level of government and all sectors of society, because the lives of our people and the stability of our economy now hang in the balance. Let this crisis be our turning point. Let this be the time when we rise up to the challenge as one nation driven by purpose. Let us prove when crisis strikes, we do not hesitate. We stand together, we act together, and do whatever it takes to safeguard our fellow Filipinos and secure our nation's future. Mr. Speaker, the people of Eastern Visayas is calling out for help. Let us answer their call. Let us act decisively. Let us lead with conviction. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Honorable Asidre. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Janet Garin for her manifestation.
The Honorable Janet Garin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, distinguished colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I laud the courage of the Honorable Jude Asidre in standing up and being the voice of millions of Leiteños and Samareños who are now left at the peril of this situation. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, ako po ay lumaki na tumatalon-talon sa San Juanico Bridge, not because it's an icon that stands between the islands of Samar and Leyte, but moreover because it is a symbol of how the former President and the former First Lady, President Ferdinand Marcos, and our First Lady Imelda Marcos paved way for a legacy project that will not only be a symbol of uniting Leyte and Samar, but more importantly, bringing forth economic activity between these two vast islands. Sa napakatagal nga panahon, Mr. Speaker, ito po ang naging simbolo ng trade, ekonomiya, kung saan yung mga produkto ng Samar ay nadadala sa Leyte at kung saan naman yung mga produkto ng Leyte ay napupunta ng Samar. Andun yung ating banig, andun yung ating maraming pagkain, andun yung napakasarap na pili. But it's not only that, Mr. Speaker. Tingnan po natin ang naging simbolo ng edukasyon where education became, and I'm referring to university education, became more affordable for Leteños and Samareños because of the bridge connecting them. Andun yung provision of healthcare services. There is trade, there is movement, there is life, Mr. Speaker. And this is a problem that could have been preempted had our respective officials been wary of serving the people, hearing the people, preempting the problems of our people, and contributing to what our people needs. It's not a mere want, it's a need. Kaya po ako ay nagagalak nung tumayo si Congressman Jude Asidre. Dahil kaakibat ng pagtayo niya, it's not a mere privileged speech, but it's a call to accountability, a call to be responsible, and a call that if you want power, if you want to be called a Filipino government official, then you must serve commensurate to what is expected. Ang biglaang pagsara ng tulay na ito ay kaakibat sa pagsara ng karamihan ng oportunidad ng ating mga kababayan. Magkakaroon ng mahirap na adjustment. And now, our government has no choice but to cater to this. Kaya, Mr. Speaker, sa pagbukas ng bagong Kongreso, sana matuldukan bakit, paano, at bakit pinabayaan ito ng matagal. But above that, what will we be doing? Ano po ang serbisyo na may bibigay natin? Paano natin maiibsan ang hirap ng ating mga kababayan sa Samar at paano natin ipagpapatuloy ang serbisyo? But with that, Mr. Speaker, I still believe that Filipinos as we are, we will always unite in the face of grave problems. Again, my kudos to Congressman Jude Asidre, and I look forward that the leadership of this Congress will look into ways and aspects where every Filipino citizen will be heard and every Filipino family will be served. Maraming salamat po, and I join the Honorable Asidre in his call for an investigation on this matter.
Thank you, Honorable Garin, for your manifestation. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, for another manifestation, I move that we recognize the Honorable Richard Gomez.
Honorable Richard Gomez is recognized.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker. Hearing the privileged speech of Congressman Jude Asidre, you know, I was once a part of the RDC 8 when I was mayor of Ormoc City. And on a yearly basis, all the problems na kinakailangan natin na ponduhan kung mayroong problema, ito ay laging tinitake up sa RDC. So yung mga regional offices, kung anong kailangan nila, inire-report po yun. I just feel bad that parang pinagbibintangan natin dito ngayon na meron neglect on DPWH. Because in the last RDC, Mr. Speaker, it was brought up that every year, DPWH will report kung ano yung kailangan ayusin sa atin. And also, andun lagi ang San Juanico Bridge. It is in the RDC report, if we will take a look at it, Mr. Speaker. So in this investigation that you want to happen, I don't know kung matutuloy pa to this coming week or pagpasok na natin ng 20th Congress, they will tell you na every year, never sila nagka-remiss sa pag-report, sa pagsabi na ang San Juanico Bridge kinakailangan ng i-retrofit, kailangan ng repair, kailangan ng annual maintenance. Siguro, maganda rin, Mr. Speaker, tignan natin sarili natin dito sa Kongreso. Bakit hindi natin napondohan yung nire-request nila? Why I'm speaking here today is because yung problema ng San Juanico, that is 110 kilometers away from Ormoc City, nararamdaman din namin yan. Ngayon lang kami nagkakaroon ng pila ng truck sa loob ng Ormoc City. And when they stay in Ormoc City, we don't have ready restrooms for them. Saan sila nagdudumi? Sa tabi-tabi. It is also affecting the health and cleanliness of our city in Ormoc. So in this coming investigation, Congressman Isidre, please take note that the RDC report, every year, merong nire-report na merong pangangailangan ang DPWH with regards to maintenance, repair, and annual checkup of the San Juanico Bridge.
Honorable Gomez, is that a manifestation or a...
It is a manifestation, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Isidre.
Mr. Speaker, I just would like to qualify the position of this representation. We have no arguments, and we agree that for the longest time we have been asking funding, even not only for the repair of the San Juanico Bridge, but including the construction of a second San Juanico Bridge, considering that we have already seen the wear and tear and the life of the structure itself. However, the position of this representation with regards to the privilege speech is about having to impose the restriction, the load restriction on the San Juanico Bridge without prior preparation and without prior notice to the concerned stakeholders. For the record, as I mentioned in my privilege speech, we are not against the rehabilitation. In fact, we welcome it. In fact, for the longest time, we've been asking for it. But the problem with the current situation is that the announcement was made on the same day the restriction took effect. And in that case, as the honorable colleague from Ormoc has mentioned, Congressman Gomez has mentioned, not everyone is ready to address the consequences with the changes in terms of alternative maritime routes, in terms of the adjustment in the traffic, and even, as mentioned earlier, even the sanitation and the other services needed for the truckers. I think it's important to qualify that our concern stems from this. Because as mentioned earlier by the Honorable Garin, this is a matter that did not happen overnight. This is something that could have been avoided. Preparations could have been made earlier. The moment DPWH felt that they needed to take in a consultant to make an structural integrity assessment of the bridge, should have started the need to draw contingency plans. It should have already beckoned DPWH to consider the worst scenario so that in case a situation would have been recommended that would warrant the restrictions on the bridge, then there would be a minimal disruption to the movements of goods and peoples as well as services from the islands of Leyte to Samar. We are one with the Honorable Gomez in saying that this has been a long concern of the region, having been part also of the Advisory Council of the Regional Development Council of the region. We've worked also closely in recommending funding for the second San Juanico Bridge. There is no question about that. Our concern for this matter is that this situation where we find ourselves in, wherein there was little or there was not inadequate preparation given prior to the closure or the imposition of load restrictions on the San Juanico Bridge could have been done better. And it's important that we put this in mind because it could happen somewhere else under similar, even worse circumstances. So it's important that before such decisions of such magnitude are taken, there could have been proper coordination with the different stakeholders.
Mr. Speaker, as part of last part of my manifestation, I would like to add, Mr. Speaker, kung pwede, kung matutuloy ang investigation natin, we will have to ask the committee secretary to please prepare all the requests of DPWH with regards to San Juanico at the start of 19th Congress. Because as reported, every year, every budget year, nire-request nila yon. Baka kung sakaling hindi na ibigay yun, baka tayo yung nag-remiss. Baka nakalimutan lang natin. Baka hindi natin nakita na talagang kailangan palang ponduhan ang pagpapaayos ng San Juanico Bridge, Mr. Speaker. So, part of his resolution, we ask that all records of requests coming from DPWH, ilabas po natin. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you, Honorable Gomez.
Sidre.
Thank you, Honorable Sidre. Majority Leader?
Mr. Speaker, I move that we refer the privileged speech of the Honorable Jude Asidre and the manifestations to the Committee on Rules.
Any objection? Hearing none, the speech of Honorable Jude Asidre, including the manifestations of Honorable Gomez and Honorable Garin, is referred to the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Rolando M. Valeriano of the 2nd District of Manila for his privileged speech.
The Honorable Rolando Valeriano of the 2nd District of Manila is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. Speaker. The May Haligi demolition is a wake-up call for legislative reform. Mr. Speaker, mga kapwa ko mambabatas, mga nanonood sa kanilang tahanan, magandang hapon po. Ako po ay tumitindig ngayon, hindi lamang bilang kinatawan ng lungsod ng Maynila, kundi bilang tinig ng milyon-milyong maralitang tagalungsod sa buong bansa. Mga pamilyang araw-araw ay nasa bingit ng demolisyon at kawalang katarungan. Nitong Lunes, Mayo 26, isang tensyonado at magulong eksena ang naganap sa Barangay 262 at Barangay 264 sa May Halige, Tondo, Maynila. Daan-daang kapwa ko Manileño ang hinarap ang mga demolition team at kapulisan. Hindi dahil gusto nila ng gulo, kundi dahil ipinaglalaban lang nila ang tanging tahanang kinalakihan nila. Isasama ko na din po ang isa pang barangay na dumadanas din ng ganitong pangyayari, ang Barangay 227, District 2, Manila. Ayon sa mga ulat, sinagawa ang demolisyon alinsunod daw sa isang court order. Pero ang tanong, totoo bang dumaan ito sa tamang proseso? Una, walang malinaw na notice na ibinigay sa mga residente. Pangalawa, walang sapat na relokasyon o makataong alternatibo para sa may 400 pamilyang may halos 70 taon nang nakatira sa May Halige. Pangatlo, walang clearance ito mula sa Presidential Commission for the Urban Poor or PICUP, gaya ng itinagubilin sa Republic Act 7279 o ang Urban Development and Housing Act at Executive Order 152 Series of 2002. Pang-apat, sangkatutak na pulis na akala mo may gera ang nag-responde dito with full battle gear. At dahil dito, naglabas ng temporary restraining order ang korte noong Mayo 27. Isang matibay na patunay na talagang may pagkukulang sa proseso. Mr. Speaker, inihiling ko sa kapulungang ito ang pagsasagawa ng congressional inquiry sa pangyayaring ito. Hindi lang ito issue ng may haligi tondo. Ito ay usapin ng batas, hustisya at karapatang pantao. Marami pa pong ibang kaso ng demolisyon na katulad nito sa iba't ibang panig ng bansa. Kasama na rin dyan ang mga problema sa relokasyon ng mga pamilyang apektado ng mga flood control projects. Higit pa rito, nananawagan ako ng moratorium sa demolisyon sa may haligi at sa barangay 227 habang hindi pa nabubusisi at naamyendahan ang mga batas ukol sa demolisyon at relokasyon. Hindi pwedeng tuloy-tuloy ang pagwasak sa mga tahanan ng mga maralita habang butas-butas ang sistema. Mr. Speaker, mga kasama, may mas malalim pa pong issue rito. Matagal nang walang nagkaka-interes sa lupaing ito, kaya pinamahayan ito ng mga maralitang tagalungsod simula noong 1950s. Pero kamakailan lamang, ito'y biglaang naibenta sa isang kumpanyang tinatawag na 2288 Eaton Realty Corporation. Paano ito naibenta ng ganon kabilis? May transparency ba? Legal ba ang transaksyon? Ang masakit pa, habang may mga ganito pang gusot, mabilis nang kumilos ang mga goons para sa demolition na para bang minamadaling maihabol bago mag-June 30. Ang modus ng mga ganyang klaseng kumpanya ay matagal nang umiiral. Maghahanap ng mga lupang may informal settlers, bibilhin ang mga lupang may informal settlers ng murang-mura. Maghahain ng kaso para mapaalis ang mga maralita. Kapag na-demolish na, ibebenta sa mas mataas na halaga. Massive profit at the expense of the poor. Mr. Speaker, kailangan pong kagyat na imbestigahan ng Kongreso ang nangyaring tangkang demolisyon sa may haligi Tondo at sa barangay 227. Ito po ang tungkulin natin bilang mga mambabatas ang maging sandigan ng mga naaapi. Hindi po ito usapin ng pagtutulak na basta-basta na lamang sasakupin ang lupa ng iba. Ang inihiling natin ngayon ay social justice at due process. Dapat balansin ang karapatan ng may-ari ng lupa at ang kapakanan ng mga maralitang taglungsod na matagal nang naninirahan sa mga lugar na ganito. May mga pamilya po sa may haligi na mahigit 70 years nang naroon, ilang henerasyon na po ang lumipas. Hindi natin pwedeng tratuhin na parang basura lang ang buhay at pangarap nila. May mga umiiral na batas para tiyaking makatao at patas ang proseso ng relokasyon. Ang problema, klarong hindi nasunod ang mga batas na iyon sa kasong ito. Mr. Speaker, dito din po tumayo si Vice President Sara Duterte para siraan ang inyong lingkod. At pagkatapos ng eleksyon, demolisyon. Mga kapwa ko mambabatas, hindi ito usapin ng isa o dalawang barangay lang. Ito po ay panawagan sa Kongresong paninindigan ng batas para sa mga walang boses na protektahan ang mga dukha laban sa abusadong makapangyarihan at tiyaking ang ating mga batas ay tunay na para sa taong bayan, hindi lang para sa mga mapepera at may koneksyon. Patunayan natin dito sa House of Representatives na posibleng makamit ang social justice, na posibleng kilalanin ang karapatan ng mga may-ari ng lupa habang kasabay na itinataguyod ang kapakanan ng mga maralitang tagalungsod na napagkaitan ng pagkakataon sa buhay. Mga kasama, mga kababayan, pagtulong-tulungan nating kumpunihin ang sirang sistema. At bago po ako magtapos, uulitin ko, dito po sa lugar ng may haligi, tumayo si Vice President Sara Duterte para ako laitin at siraan habang ang mga kandidato na kasama niya ay nagtatawanan at marahil ay naging dahilan para ako ay makabalik at mahalal muli. Salamat po.
Thank you, Honorable Valeriano. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we refer the speech of the Honorable Valeriano to the Committee on Rules.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the speech of Honorable Valeriano is referred to the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that we recognize the Honorable Representative Arlene D. Brosas of Gabriela Party List for her privilege.
The Honorable Arlene Brosas of the Gabriela Party List is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, mga kapwa kinatawan sa kapulungang ito, sa mga kababaihan at manggagawang Pilipino, at sa lahat ng mga nakikinig, nakikiisa at naririto sa ating sesyon sa plenaryo, isang palabang pagbati. Sa muling pagbubukas ng ating regular na session sa Kongreso, allow me to stand at this podium and speak about one of the most important issues that we think must be met with utmost urgency: the long overdue demand of Filipino workers for a legislated wage increase to meet the living wage. We are a nation kept alive by those who tirelessly toil, by those we consider as the backbone of our economy, and our daily encounters with them attest to this. Mr. Speaker, even the session hall was built brick by brick by our construction workers. Yet our construction workers are paid only 14,199 pesos on an average per month, or roughly just 590 pesos per day, despite the back-breaking work. Bitin na bitin ito sa 1,200 pesos na nakabubuhay na sahod na kailangan ng isang pamilyang Pilipino. The meager average daily minimum wage in the Philippines merely amounts to 470 pesos, where the highest daily minimum wage set at 645 pesos for workers within the NCR is still far from the target family living wage. Mr. Speaker, ngayon nga'y nasa bingit pa ng pagkabitin ang panukalang 200 pesos na dagdag sahod dahil iilang araw na lang ang natitira bago tuluyang magsara ang 19th Congress. The last time a legislated wage hike was granted was in 1989. That was already 36 years ago. Mahigit 3 dekada na, Mr. Speaker. In 2007, a 125 peso wage increase that was likewise actively sought and fought for by workers since the 2000s almost made its way to Malacanang, but was later on delayed and derailed, therefore eventually failing to materialize. Under the current administration, dadalawang barya-baryang taas sahod pa lamang ang naipatutupad ni hindi nga ito ramdam ng pangkaraniwang mamamayan dahil sa patong-patong at napakamahal na presyo ng mga bilihin at bayarin. And now that we are presented with the rare opportunity to significantly raise our workers' wages, hiling nating hindi na tayo bitinin at tipirin pa. The 1,200 peso computed family living wage, according to the Ibon Foundation, takes into consideration the skyrocketing cost of goods and services amidst high inflation rate. Matatanda ang ibinungad sa atin sa unang mga linggo pa lamang ng taon ang pagtaas ng presyo ng pagkain at iba pang batayang bilihin, at gayon din ang nakalululang singil sa tubig, kuryente, langis, transportasyon at iba pang batayang utilidad at serbisyo. Pinalalala ito ng pagpapataw ng patong-patong na buwis sa mga consumer, VAT sa basic goods and services, excise tax sa langis, Dagdag pa riyan ang mas mataas na mandatory contributions at state exactions gaya ng SSS, Pag-ibig at PhilHealth na kinakaltas sa kakarampot na take-home pay ng mga manggagawa. Ang resulta, malawakang kahirapan at kagutuman. In a 2024 SWS survey, nakapagtala ng 63% self-rated poverty, pinakamataas sa nakalipas na 21 years. Dumoble rin ang involuntary hunger sa ilalim ng Administrasyong Marcos mula 11.6% o 2.9 milyon pamilyang Pilipino noong June 2022 tungong 27.2% or 7.5 million pamilyang Pilipino ngayong Marso 2025. Ibon interpreted this widespread poverty and hunger as a consequence of the low wages and high prices in the country that barely allow ordinary Filipino people to put food on the table or live a decent and livable life. Mr. Speaker, it is enshrined in Section 3, Article 13 of our Constitution that our workers shall be entitled to security of tenure, humane conditions of work, and a living wage. The National Wages and Productivity Commission, NWPC, comprehensively defines such living wage as the amount of family income needed to provide for the family's food and non-food expenditures, with sufficient allowance for savings, investments for social security, so as to enable the family to live and maintain a decent standard of human existence beyond mere subsistence level, taking into account all of the family's physiological, social, and other needs. Sa madaling sabi, nakabubuhay na sahod na tutugon sa pangkalahatang pangangailangan ng mga Pilipino at kani-kanilang pamilya. Kaya naman, sa konteksto ng malawakang kahirapan at kagutuman, kasabay ng nagtataasang presyo ng mga bilihin at privatisasyon ng mga serbisyo at utilidad, nararapat lamang na iangat ang sahod ng mga manggagawa. Subalit, sa halip na agarang ipatupad ito, higit na hinihila pababa ang halaga ng sahod sa bansa sa pamamagitan ng wage deregulation, pagwasak sa pambansang minimum wage para palitan ng iskemang wage regionalization at pagpapatindi ng fleksibilisasyon sa paggawa ng isang forma ay kontraktualisasyon. Humahati pa ang mga manpower agencies at service contractors sa kakarampot na sahod ng mga kontraktual na manggagawa sa pamamagitan ng mga hindi deklaradong kaltas at agency fees, habang tuwiran silang pinagkakaitan ng mga benepisyo sa ilalim ng eskemang ito. The largest number of contractual workers in the country is in the wholesale and retail trade, manufacturing, accommodation, food, and service sectors. And in all of this, women account for almost 4 in every 10 workers in job order or contractual arrangements. Ang itsura nito sa aktwal ay milyon-milyong mga manggagawang pinagkakaitan ng karampatang proteksyon at suporta. Taliwas sa mandato ng Estado na protektahan at suportahan ang mga manggagawa at empleyado. At the same time, the number of informal workers this year remains high at 19.8 million, where 13.4 million of which are self-employed. 3.2 million work in family farms or businesses without pay, and majority of them are women, and 2 million work within private households. Ang ganitong paglobo ng impormal na sektor ay sintomas lamang ng malawakang kakulangan ng disenteng trabaho sa bansa, bunsod ng lugmok na lokal na agrikultura at industriya. Kinakaharap din ng mga manggagawa ang kawalan ng katiyakan at kaligtasan sa trabaho. In the recent years alone, we've witnessed widespread mass layoffs that devastated our workers, Mula 2020 hanggang 2024, nakapagtala ang Center for Women's Resources ng kabi-kabilang tanggalan ng trabaho sa garments, electronics, BPO, manufacturing, at service sectors. Ang iba ay basta na lamang inilalagay sa floating status nang walang kasiguraduhan kung kailan makakabalik sa trabaho at muling makakatanggap ng sahod. All in all, as per the recent Labor Force Survey, the number of employed Filipinos substantially dropped by 1.2 million from 49.2 million in March 2024 to only 48 million in March 2025. At bagaman makatwiran lamang ang umalma sa hindi makataong kondisyon sa mga pagawaan, marahas ang Estado pagdating sa mga manggagawang sama-samang tumitindig para sa kanilang mga karapatan. Union and labor repression still persists in this country, and this ranges from widespread and systematic red tagging, surveillance, filing of trumped-up charges, threat and intimidation, harassment, up to deliberate killings of labor activists. As a result, unionized workers significantly declined from 6.3% of Filipino workers in 2018 to only 4.5% in 2022. In these figures, women's participation still fared lower than that of men. Mr. Speaker, barat, bitin, at hindi nakabubuhay ang sahod ng mga manggagawang Pilipino. Papalagpasin pa ba natin ang pagkakataong magpasa ng batas para matamasa nila ang nararapat na dagdag sahod? As early as the start of the 19th Congress, this representation filed two key pieces of legislation concerning workers' wages: the proposed national minimum wage and 750 pesos across the board wage increase for workers from the private sector. Ipinapanukala ng mga polisiyang ito ang pagkakaroon ng 1,200 national minimum wage that would in effect abolish the regional wage boards. Nasaksihan nating magmula ng maipatupad ang Wage Regionalization Act, barya-barya lamang ang pinagkakaloob nitong aumento sa sahod habang dama naman sa bawat sulok ng bansa ang pagtaas ng presyo ng mga bilihin at serbisyo. This has also created two fragmented wage levels, allowing corporations and companies to peg lower minimum wages. 750 pesos naman ang bit-bit nating halaga ng across-the-board wage increase para sa mga manggagawa ng pribadong sektor. This amount was not pulled out of thin air, as it represents the average gap between existing regional minimum wages and the computed 1,200 pesos family living wage. That would satisfy the food and non-food necessities of Filipino families. Early this year, the Committee on Labor and Employment approved the consolidated 200 pesos across-the-board wage hike bill. Malayo man ito sa minimithi nating 750 pesos across-the-board wage increase na magtutulay sana sa kasalukuyang halaga ng sahod patungong 1,200 pesos family living wage. Kinikilala ng representasyong ito ang kahalagahan ng agarang pagpapataas sa sahod ng mga manggagawang sadsad sa kahirapan. Maituturing pa rin itong positibong hakbang tungo sa pagtataas ng kalidad ng buhay ng mga manggagawa at pagbibigay sa kanila ng kaunting alwan sa harap ng malawakang krisis sa ekonomiya. Since it was passed at the committee level, hindi nasundan pa ng agarang aksyon at pag-uusap para itulak ang panukalang batas. Marahil ay senyales ito ng pagsasantabi at pagsasawalang bahala sa kalagayan ng mga manggagawang araw-araw pinapatay ng kahirapan at kagutuman. They cannot afford any more delays in attaining their right to a living wage. At the same time, this might also be indicative of the surrounding arguments that go against a substantial wage increase, surfacing the same rhetoric of wage increases are inflationary or that it would burden micro, small, and medium enterprises. Various economists have already claimed this to be false. On the contrary, increasing wages has a strong economic multiplier effect. For one, low-income wage workers tend to spend most of what they earn because they are starting from low levels of consumption, as opposed to profits which are often saved and accumulated. Second, wage increases will be spent locally and on MSMEs, including informal enterprises in their communities, thus spurring local economic activity, which helps small businesses and induces job generation. Third, low-income families spend around 48% of their income on food, meaning increased spending on food will stimulate demand and economic activity in the countryside and across the country. Meanwhile, as we recognize the impact of mandating wage increases on MSMEs, which is exactly why the government should step in and provide wage subsidies to ensure that their workers receive fair wages while ensuring the survival of their businesses, we have to counter the arguments that pit ordinary workers and small business owners against each other. The real issue and injustice here is that much of the wealth we incur from increased labor productivity throughout the years has not resulted in higher wages nor stronger local industries, but instead translated to thicker and thicker profits for big businesses and corporations, thus further widening inequality and concentrating wealth to a few. Kaya sa napakaikling panahong natitira sa kasalukuyang Kongreso, ang sigaw ng mga manggagawa, 200 pesos across the board wage hike bill, isabatas na, Pangulong Marcos i-certify as urgent and legislated wage increase, sahod itaas pa patungong nakasasapat at nakabubuhay na antas. As I close this speech, I would like to recognize the workers, organizers, and trade union leaders who graced us with their presence and resoluteness in raising these calls at our session today. Jerome Adonis, Secretary General, Kilusang Mayo 1, former Representative Ariel Casilaw, Chairperson, Union ng Manggagawa sa Agrikultura, Charlito Arevalo, spokesperson, Unity for Wage Increase Network, Jacqueline Ruiz, spokesperson, Kilusan ng Manggagawang Kababaihan, Julius Carandang, Secretary, Metal Workers Alliance of the Philippines, Julie Ann Gutierrez, spokesperson, Kilos na Manggagawa, Mary Ann Castillo, President, Nexperia Workers Union, Ivan Ilagan, Second Vice President, Gabay ng Union sa Telekomunikasyon ng mga Supervisor, Goods PLDT, Maylene Cabalona, National President, BPO, Industry Employees Network, BIEN Philippines, Manuel Baclagon, Secretary General, Courage, Santiago Dasmariñas, President, Courage, Eufemia Doringo, Secretary General, Kalipunan ng Damayang Mahihirap o Kadamay, Robert Mendoza, former National President, Alliance of Health Workers, Maylene Chanco, National Treasurer, Alliance of Health Workers. Sila ang ilan sa mga pangunahin at buhay na bumibit-bit ng panawagang itaas ang sahod ng mga manggagawa sa antas na nakasasapat at nakabubuhay. Patunay ang kanilang presensya sa plenaryong ito na ang ating mga panukalat panawagan ay hindi lamang panukalat panawagan, kundi aktwal na kahingiang itinutulak ng laksa-laksang manggagawang naghahangad ng mas maalwang buhay at bukas. Ilang dekada na nila itong kinakampanya sa mga pabrika, empresa, pagawaan, komunidad at lansangan. At patuloy nila itong titindigan at ipaglalaban sa loob o labas man ng Kongreso. Let the calls of our workers linger and reverberate inside this session hall. As legislators, we must consider the proposals of our workers on matters concerning their rights as these come from their concrete situations. Our workers deserve this and so much more. Sa napakahabang panahon, sila ang bumubuhay sa ating bansa. Hayaan naman nating silang mabuhay ng ligtas, may dignidad at natatamasa ang kanilang mga pangangailangan at karapatan. sahod itaas at mabuhay ang mga manggagawa. Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker.